Hello and welcome back to the Fantasy Playmakers. Today I'm going to be talking about some early round running back targets. So I'm going to look at the first 4 rounds of current fantasy drafts, and I'm going to point out 3 guys who I think are great values at the running back position early on. And these are probably the most important picks. Your early running backs are the guys that are really going to carry you throughout the season. So you really want to hit on these guys. And if you're able to get values this early in the draft, you're going to be set up really well for the season. So the first guy I want to talk about is Nick Chubb, and he's currently being picked at the 12.5 slot. So Chubb is basically being picked around the last pick of a 12-man draft in the first round or very early in the second round. And I think this is just a little bit too low for Nick Chubb. He's going as the 10th running back off the board, but I think he's really a very consistent option. In 2019, he was number 7 in total points for running backs and 10th in points per game. Then in 2020, 9th in total points, and that was only playing 12 games, and then he was 7th in points per game. And 2020 was his first year with Kevin Stefanski, who came in and really established a great running game. Him and Hunt were both very successful on the ground, and I just expect them to build on that. Chubb averaged 5.6 yards per carry, which is incredibly efficient for a running back. And really the only downside with Chubb is his lack of work in the receiving game. Only averaged 1.5 targets per game last year, but we've seen guys like Derrick Henry, if they get enough work on the ground, they can overcome that lack of receiving work and still be very efficient and finish as top-tier running backs. So these are some stats that Nick Chubb had last year that really just show how impressive he is on the ground. And I think these kind of give some credibility to just how good of a running back Nick Chubb is. So he was number 4 in yards per touch. And this is especially impressive for Chubb because to come in at number 4 without having a lot of receptions is pretty unheard of. Normally, if you get most of your work on the ground and you're not really involved in the passing game, that yards per touch is going to be lower because in general, receptions go for a lot more yards than rushes do. But to come in at number 4 with only 1.5 targets per game just shows how effective he is when he is running the ball. He was number 2 in breakaway runs, and that is with only playing 12 games. Number 3 in breakaway run rate, number 6 in evaded tackles, number 1 in juke rate, and number 1 in yards created per touch. So really just a guy who's going to be incredibly effective on the ground, and I think he's just going to be a really consistent, solid option this year. So if I can get him in the early second round, I'm very happy with that because I think I'm getting a running back 1 and a guy who really has top potential to finish maybe in the top half of the running back 1 category, but also a guy who provides week-to-week consistency. The next guy I want to talk about is James Robinson, and he's a guy that I've been talking up in a lot of other videos. He's currently being picked at the 31st selection, which is the back end of the 3rd round. He's going after guys like J.K. Dobbins, DeAndre Swift, and I just think this is crazy because people are fading James Robinson because they're concerned about Carlos Hyde coming in. They think he's going to be getting less work. And yeah, Carlos Hyde coming in, he's going to get some of those carries, but it was bound to happen. James Robinson had an 85.2% opportunity share, which was first in the NFL, and that's not something that's sustainable throughout someone's whole career. So they bring in Carlos Hyde, who's going to be the backup. He's just going to get a couple of those carries. He's not going to be in on the goal line taking the touchdowns. He's not going to be in on 3rd down getting receiving work. James Robinson is just the overall better back than Carlos Hyde, and I'm not concerned about him at all. I really just think this prevents them from going out and getting a young running back in the draft, which is something that I probably would have been concerned with. But you look at guys like J.K. Dobbins and DeAndre Swift, they have better direct competition on their rosters. J.K. Dobbins is competing with Lamar Jackson and Gus Edwards for carries, rush yards, and goal line opportunities. And DeAndre Swift, the Lions just brought in Jamal Williams, who's proven that he can be a very effective second running back. You saw him in Green Bay behind Aaron Jones. He can catch the ball, he can run the ball, he's a solid all-around back. So I just don't understand how James Robinson is falling behind these guys who have much more competition in their backfield, are going to get less work, and haven't proven as much as James Robinson has. So if I can get James Robinson back into the 3rd round as my 2nd or 3rd running back, I'm loving that value. And even though James Robinson is going to see a little bit of a decrease in his volume in the offense, I think the Jaguars are going to be giving more opportunities to their running backs this year because last year they had the worst game script in the NFL. This means that essentially the Jaguars were falling behind very early in games, which forces teams to run the ball less and pushes them to pass the ball more, so the running backs kind of get phased out of the game. And so this happened the most for the Jaguars. They were down early, which definitely limited James Robinson's total touches. But now you have Trevor Lawrence, likely to be the number one pick. You have Marvin Jones coming in. You have a decent O-line. So they've invested in this offense, and it's going to be much improved this year, in my opinion. And the last thing I have to say is if James Robinson was a first, second, third round pick in last year's draft, there is no question that he would be going early, mid-second round. There'd be talks about him or Cam Akers, guys in that range. And so I just think with James Robinson being an undrafted rookie, people still aren't sure about him. But I think you can be sure. You saw what he could do at the NFL level. He's a competent NFL running back and a good one. And so I think when you're drafting, you could capitalize on these other players who are doubting him and ranking him way lower. And you're going to be able to go out and get a guy who has RB1 potential, who could technically be your RB2 or RB3. The last guy I want to talk about is Chris Carson from the Seahawks. He is currently being selected at around the 37th pick. So this is basically very early fourth round or very end of the third round. And he's being the 20th running back taken off the board. And I just want to point back to Chris Carson's last 3 years and just show how consistent he's been and why this 20 running back ranking is pretty absurd. So in 2018, he finished number 15 in total points and number 13 in points per game. Then in 2019, number 11 in total points, number 13 in points per game. Then in 2020, number 17 in total points and number 14 in points per game. And so this is half PPR formats, so standard or PPR would vary a little bit, but he's in that range. He's always around that tail end of the RB1 group and a high-end running back 2. And so for me, for him to be being selected as the 20th running back is pretty crazy. If you're picking him at this ADP, I think you can feel very confident with him turning in a high-end second-tier running back season. The Seahawks have also come out and said that they're committed to running the ball this year. They want to take a little bit of the pressure off of Russell Wilson. So this is only good news for Chris Carson. He's going to get some more opportunities. And I talked about this in my previous video when I was giving my overall player rankings. But there's a misconception that Chris Carson is very injury prone, when in reality, he's only missed 8 games in the last 3 years, which is not bad for a running back. So people are going to fade him because he's injury prone when it's not even proven to be true. Also, last year, Chris Carson did show pretty solid improvement in his receiving work. He caught 37 receptions for 287 yards and 4 touchdowns, and this is with him having a shortened season. So I'm feeling really good about Chris Carson this year. If you can get Chris Carson in the 4th round, I think that's tremendous value. He's a guy, he's not a super flashy pick. He's not one of these young rookies, but he's going to be consistent week in, week out, and he can really help you make that championship push. So these are 3 guys, Nick Chubb, James Robinson, and Chris Carson are guys that I'm targeting early in the drafts. I think they're being undervalued right now and are being picked way too late. So let me know what you guys think. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Do you agree with these guys? Do you have another guy that you're going to be targeting, a running back early in the first couple rounds? Let me know. Also, if you enjoyed the video, liking and subscribing would help me out a ton. Thank you guys so much for watching and listening. See you guys next time.